of us, looking at it as an opportunity to kind of seize the reins of history. But, the reins of history, they sure do seize back.
History moves fast these days.
Yeah, and you're definitely living through it, to say the least. We talked about the war in Venezuela, and we talked about asking for accurate reporting from the press. This is something that, we've been on the streets, going to the media and talking about. And to be fair, I bet very few people expected the president, after a special military, say, we want the oil. We're after the oil. They're sitting on the oil that we want. It's hard for the news not to report what's maybe one of the more brazen incidents in the history of the world.
Yeah, I mean,
name the times that one head of state has kidnapped a head of state and his wife. Pull out your textbooks, you'd say that's a rare incident.
Yeah, it makes me think of incidents relating to like colonial history in Africa and stuff, where you had, like members of the whole royal families that were like taken off to France and were like, they had to live there. It's kind of very different, but
this isn't a moment with an exact historical analog.
Yeah.
But it does have precedent in the history of the United States. When we talk about, we just say the United States, a wide history in Latin America, and we make a grimace.
And just to be clear, this moment we're talking about, as we broadcast on January the 4th, it's yesterday or the day before? Yesterday, the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, was abducted by the United States military, who are carrying out, I guess, the bounty that Trump put on Maduro's head, right? Or the arrest warrant if, the government declared him this top criminal, supposedly.
The English language is struggling with the illegality of what we're seeing.
Yeah.
How can these things be classified as wars? Can they be classified as arrests? Can they be classified as kidnappings?
Right.
Just what language has typically the legal language for the relationships between heads of state has been skewed in a way that's hard to describe right now. They sure snatched him up. We can use the language of the streets. A bunch of guys went in there and grabbed him and put him on a plane and brought him to New York.
Yeah.
And he's in New York now.
When people talk about the contradictions sharpening, this is, the hegemony getting more and more absurd to where we can't even understand what it's supposed to mean. We're reaching the limits of when we talk about what's legal or not, because Trump, it's like he doesn't care about the letter of the law. He basically uses the law as a weapon to push the law as far in a certain direction as possible.
Yeah, when we say the phrase break the law, of course, it's fun to say it's just you're using the phrase to discuss illegality, like it violates the law.
Mm-hmm.
But also what he's trying to do is literally break the force of the law by weakening it through taking actions that are going to be difficult for the law to categorize and enforce.
And primarily this is like laws that are, when we talk on the international sphere about like human rights type, UN laws, or domestically about like civil rights and things that like the executive is not allowed to do. That's where we're seeing him push and the Republicans push. And, it's almost like, Trump literally has broken so many laws at this point. And we're also so used to kind of having this double speak sort of where there's government sanctioned and then there's normal, right? And if somebody is arrested legally, they're arrested, but if somebody just takes them, they're kidnapped. And now ICE is kidnapping people, and, there's sort of this gray area where it's like the authorities are behaving so illegitimately that the whole meaning of authority becomes, comes into question in some of the ways that like abolitionists and anarchists were already pointing out.
It's impossible to have a discussion about this stuff without saying, well, the idea of, quote, exposing the contradictions, this isn't just a thing that's existing on the left. This is a strategy that's being pursued with intention. You know, Steve Bannon isn't in the administration right now, but when he calls himself a Leninist, he's talking about geopolitics in a very similar.
I wasn't aware that he ever called himself a Leninist.
He's called himself a Leninist.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
And he may have his tongue slightly in cheek, but he's clearly has done the reading, and the things that are being referred to, he understands and wants to exacerbate as a matter of strategy.
Right.
And you're seeing...
It's more like he takes notes from Lenin, because I feel like that's, you know, Steve Bannon's obviously like a Nazi.
He's speaking in terms of his approach to operations.
Yeah, right. Right.
Yeah.
And what would you say is the main characteristic?
Like if Mosaic were to say we were like the Heritage Foundation. But of course we're not at all. But when you think of the ways that the Heritage Foundation has used a three-dimensional perspective to put itself in the lives of, I guess we're not as a lobbying group. But you know that there are like...
Just in the same way that they've been very effective as
intellectual seizure of the operating class.
Yeah, as a group that pushes certain activist ideas and tries to push the government in a certain direction.
Yeah.
You might try and see things but they're obviously also getting billionaire funding that we're not even going for.
They got a lot of full spreadsheets. So do we. But anyway, where are we going here?
So what does Leninist even mean at this point, right?
Good question.
That's one thing is, you know, so Steve Bannon can even go to the extent of saying that when he also, like, hates communism or whatever. Of
course, yeah.
And, you know, you have other people who say they're Leninist and have all kinds of kind of idiosyncratic takes on it.
Of course, everybody, and this is important or worth mentioning, for politics on the left or the right or the center, contradiction is actually extremely powerful. Whenever you can execute a contradiction, it's a direct application of power. Some people seek out contradictions and try to fulfill them because just imagine every United States president, and we're just talking about the application of political power, has itemized some kind of contradiction or has utilized some kind of contradiction in their identity or the groups that they appeal to. Or, I mean, in average politics, we may use the phrase coalition building. That's contradiction.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to people like what you talked about on the people who are on the far right, they can just take on a label like that and say, oh, I'm this, oh, I'm that. And reach a new, you know, kind of label.
Right.
And they get no pushback or problem, you know. I don't consider myself a Leninist, but let's see, like Maduro says he's a Leninist. We've talked about how, you know, Venezuela, you know, to some extent falls short of being a socialist, you know, state, socialist economy.
Yeah, it's great that when somebody wants to dive into these issues, it's only been 3 weeks, but now we can tell people go back.
Right.
One of the cool benefits of using this specific platform is that we're kind of engaged in a regular dialogue with history. People can say good take, bad take. So we can say, go back and listen to our discussion of Venezuela, and they can also go to our website.
Honestly, I think it it might be bad to even entertain this whole notion of Steve Bannon being a Leninist, because I feel like those guys say things all the time.
Don't take.
But we have to take seriously.
I will say, here's what I'll say. Take seriously the idea that as you ascend in political power, that you may say or do things that are completely contradictory while you act. Right. And that people will record what you're doing and point out the contradiction. This may be uncomfortable to say. People may point out and record your contradiction, but as they are recording your contradicting, you will be acting. This is a paraphrase of Karl Rove, who used this quote to taunt the media in the 2000s on the build up to Iraq. He said, "You guys are recorders. You guys can sit here and record, and we're going to be acting. Right. You guys will be writing. You guys will be spending your time writing down while we're doing everything."
I think that is a huge aspect behind the logic of Trump and the way that this administration moves differently from previous administrations is that there's a recognition that the press and the opposition will be so ineffective in pushing back that if they can move quickly enough, they can get things done to where all of that hand-wringing doesn't matter by the time the dust has settled.
Now, we're living in history right now. It's January of 2026, and no one knows the consequences of what this person is doing. Mm-hmm. This is very shocking as a headline. Mm-hmm. It looks and sounds tough. We may in 9 months have a totally different viewpoint, and in 5 years we may have a totally different viewpoint, and in 30 years we may have a totally different viewpoint then.
Yeah. Well, and I do think it's worth thinking about how the Steve Bannon type mentality has influenced this way of operating that they're having now. And now it's Stephen Miller, right? Stephen Miller now sits, I think, in the position that Steve Bannon used to be in.
Yeah. He's the deputy chief of staff.
Right. And he's a Nazi. He's like ideologically fascist to the point where, that probably plays into this war footing where, we now have instead of Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of War. And, fascists have this attitude that it's like we have to keep going to war to keep putting ourselves under selection to evolve to be strong, as a country.
Yeah. You said it pretty well.
Teddy Roosevelt was really a big example of that sort of ideology before Nazism even. Yeah. And it itself sort of came out of this sort of mentality associated with like the elite cavalry corps in the military.
Yeah, this show is pretty good. Just to divert for a minute, as we build the show, we're gonna get some nice swishing graphics. We'll get some rolling B-roll of history.
Well, let's talk about that behind the scenes. Let's try and focus on Maduro's kidnapping, and you talked about sort of how it relates to Iraq. I do think it's definitely pretty interesting to compare what's happening now versus, back during the Iraq War, the military and the press and Congress had to be wooed. Even though it was all coming from the military and the executive, there was this effort.
The resulting political blowback from the Iraq War has completely neutered Congress. A lot of those Congress people lost their jobs as part of the blowback to the Iraq War. Instead of having a Congress that was more sensitive about going into war, we instead have a Congress that would prefer to abdicate saying anything at all in regards to war and not making any statement in any direction at all.
Yeah.
And so increasingly, you've seen what's called the unitary executive theory, that the president is in charge of all of the security operations. Once you say, that the president has a certain emergency ability to command the military, then suddenly, and who's in charge of declaring the emergency?
Right.
So
that's a big thing that in the Supreme Court, Justice Anton Scalia was put in place by Bush for that reason.
Yeah.
And that was a big part of his influence on the court. Yeah. And so, now with Trump, we've seen him take it so far as to where the stuff about habeas corpus and the limits on the military are being deleted from the Library of Congress website, from the Constitution. Yeah. He really is trying to erode those protections entirely. And in the process, it erodes to some extent the legal, the philosophical justification for that people had for aspects of our system.
Well, we can only hope that people take more direct accountability for the choices of the government. And that should be everybody's response to what they're seeing now, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's been said since the early days of socialism that, like, the rich men send the poor to die for their profits, right? And, if we were smart, we'd put our loyalty in the international working class as opposed to any particular nation.
You've said it pretty well.
So, the question is, how do we turn around and hold those people accountable who are in these high offices and causing all of this harm around the world? How do we hold the war criminals and the war profiteers accountable? So
and when he talks about, like, you can't let anybody, if you just let the people over there decide, you'll end up in the same situation that you had before, because of course that's the will of the people that are there.
Uh-huh.
That when he talks about what he wants to do, I mean, it doesn't take the phrase, it doesn't take a genius to underestimate. He's just telling you, going back to the state of affairs where the people have control over what happens on their own dirt is not acceptable to him.
Well, and going back to Iraq, it's like a lot of people did not like Saddam Hussein, but you remove Saddam Hussein and suddenly, people also don't like to be dominated by a foreign country. So you have all these resistance groups doing all these crazy stuff, and it gets worse of a security situation than before.
Yeah.
I mean, the other big thing coming out of that is that in 2002, sort of before the Iraq War began, Congress passed through the Hague Invasion Act.
Yeah.
Which, that's a name for, I guess, it's called something like the Act to Protect American Service Members or something like that. But the whole point of it is that it authorizes the U.S. military to invade the International Criminal Court if any of the top military officials are tried for war crimes. So this move, even though it was a domestic political kind of thing that they passed, it was an authorization for the military that sort of changed the game for international politics now, where it really solidified before Trump even that the U.S. is the big dog. The UN doesn't really get to do a lot of the things that it would otherwise do, because the U.S. can exert military power over the UN.
Right, yep. And, it's not like any president has attempted to roll that back.
Right.
And of course, it would just be bureaucratically unpopular.
And why would they roll back their own power?
Yeah. And you couldn't even pass that to I don't even know if that would pass referendum.
Yeah.
If we really asked, that's maybe a question that should be asked to some of the people that we interact with. I don't know if that's, people obviously would think that it should change as a matter of justice if you asked every individual. then they probably say, of course, the United States shouldn't invade the international court if one of their leaders is convicted of a war crime. But, however, in the voting booth where people can silently express their opinion, I wonder if people would end up having a different marked opinion.
Yeah, and I wonder if there's any world where there is some sort of rules-based order that covers everyone, because that's what we came to at the end of World War II to get the UN, right?
Yeah.
It managed to get us through the Cold War without setting off a nuclear war yet, but it's like them being able to do that kind of on one level practically, it makes it so that, you know, the UN does not work on the U.S. The U.S. is committing war crimes. Nothing can be done about it. But on another level, ideologically, it no longer works in its premise. If it's not able to deliver the equal rights for everybody that is its mission, it doesn't have the same appeal. People don't believe in it the same way. Maybe that doesn't matter as much as just kind of...
I think it matters a lot.
Yeah.
I think it matters a whole lot. I mentioned this in a previous newsletter, just talked about the fall of Athens, and if you look at the writing from the last days of the Greek Empire, it's exactly like this.
Wow.
It's the leaders suddenly, and you know, if you've read the history of Greece, that the Greeks were very
Pericles.
They were very into honor. They were very into virtuous conduct. Right before the Greek Empire collapses, they start talking like Trump.
Wow.
They start saying, hey, this world is a might make right world. We're the strongest empire. Yeah. Everybody depends on us for everything. It's time for us to take what we're owed. And it just turns out that a lot of the success of, and I guess it's not even controversial to say there's similarities between the United States and Greece. Any empire that touts itself as virtuous and enjoys the goodwill of the people that it exploits, and this could be the Greeks or the Persians or just any empire that has PR.
Yeah.
Just as soon as you pull the rug out from under yourself, people stop paying tribute. They stop sending their best and their brightest minds.
Right.
There's brain drain. Civil services start going down the hill.
Right.
The military and other groups stop being organized efficiently. The dumbest people start getting in charge. And shit goes downhill right away.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, it feels like, I can imagine the Athenian equivalent of like the Kamala Harris, And looking at our latest election, it's hard for someone to appeal to this democratic politics when they're wrapping themselves in this, I want to protect equal rights for everybody.
Yeah.
And that's a bold-faced lie. Because they don't care about that when it comes to politicians or whatever. Yeah. But then the person comes along who's like, that is a bold-faced lie. I'm going to be bold-faced everything, right, including brutal to my enemies.
Yeah.
There's an appeal in that the appeal of the alternative has been lost. Because the sincerity is gone.
Right. Correct. Yes. And now, this doesn't necessarily mean that it's irretrievably going to be a complete endless downward spiral, because it's also, although, we're talking about history, so the phrase downward spiral is not exactly applicable, but just for the sake of just having a discussion of history, there are many demagogues who exert unprecedented power for a time, and then once they're gone, the system actually does step right over them.
Yeah.
It's not unprecedented with demagogues in both the United States and in countries like Italy. An Italian would laugh and say that Berlusconi, after coming and leaving, was just brushed right over. But if you were to compare it to the Trump, a lot of the things that Berlusconi did were so shocking and scandalous to Italian. But then once he was gone, things, I wouldn't say went back to normal, because there's still the far right element in
Italy. Don't they have a far right prime minister?
Yeah, they
have
a far right prime minister now.
Yeah,
but but many of the individual abuses of Berlusconi, or the changes in the historical tradition of Italy, just a lot of the flamboyant changes or styles of a demagogue, and I just compare them both in that way.
Yeah,
were reverted right away.
Well, we may see some things similar to Trump like that, where the most extreme things and the most scandalous things are so obvious, and when the person is dealt with, some of those things are dealt with.
We may be,
and there's like institutional changes that are more lasting that people don't notice, right? But they set in and they stay after Trump is gone.
We may be in 15 years pointing back to people in the Trumpet about things happening in the Trump administration today to explain the realities of politics.
I mean, we just said, back in the Bush administration, these reforms that they passed brought us down this path of delegitimizing the UN and allowing the U.S. to just kind of be belligerent however they want.
Yeah.
Trump has already done lots of things like that will have an effect years later, where we look back and say, wow, Trump laid the groundwork.
It's hard to imagine someone laying the groundwork for something more shocking than this.
For the utter disintegration disintegration of the global order of the UN, which in a lot of ways served American imperialism, up to a point which we've passed.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. Of course, we had just more of history. We had under Bush and Obama, you had sanctions. Mm-hmm. You had diplomatic isolation and different acts of aggression against Venezuelan leaders and institutions.
Our military-industrial complex has always been pushing successive American governments to get more and more imperialist, but it does feel like it's a substantive ideological step with Trump to where it no longer needs to be justified. It no longer needs to be talked about.
5 or 6 years ago, you had Juan Guaido just appoint himself the leader of Venezuela, and they tried that. But the people just rejected it because this guy, Guaido, just didn't have the touch. And now we're just saying, who needs the touch?
Well, and
who
it's
needs
not
the
like
law? Who needs anything? Just go for it.
It's not like this new puppet president suddenly has the touch. It's like, it's different if you're talking about a guy who is just in embassies saying he's the president versus a person saying they're the president and they have the force of the U.S. military behind them. Taking down the Venezuelan,
It's such a strange situation. Trump has recognized Maduro's current vice president, who has said that they recognize Maduro as the president and that they don't want to... Oh, you don't know this? Trump has said that negotiations in terms of international relationships will not be with the opposition leader, but will be with Maduro, sitting vice president. Did you know that?
That's fascinating. I did not know that. I thought he was still going the Juan Guaido route.
With this opposition leader? No, actually the opposite. And he said she's a very nice person. She won the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah.
She's been sucking up to him.
Well,
but one thing that Trump does is he always betrays his loyalists.
Well, he makes personal relationships with leaders very important.
Yeah. But
he really... And principles... He understands that leaders will talk out the side of their mouth and principles go by the wayside, and he wants a leader in place who will personally be his friend.
Yeah.
not as a friend genuinely, but like an ally.
He said that this opposition leader was a nice person, but she did not have the respect that would be needed to inherit the state of Venezuela.
It makes me think of his meeting with Zoran Mamdani, where he suddenly was like, he's cool. I was just calling for him to, saying he was an Islamic communist and needs to be arrested, but
and
he's actually cool now.
It's interesting. One of Mamdani's opponents in the state, Elise Stefanik, who's was running for governor at the time of all of this, dropped out of the governor's race like 3 weeks after that Trump and Mamdani meeting.
Yeah.
You know, they asked Trump, is he a jihadist? And Trump was like, no, he seems normal to me.
Yeah.
So Stefanik, the Republican governor, was like, what are you doing here? Are you trying to help me at all? Aren't we supposed to be demonizing this guy? What gives?
Interesting, huh?
Yeah, she dropped out like last week or the week before that.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, a lot of interesting things are happening, you know, and I think it shows that, I mean, I will say, you know, as much as we can condemn the U.S. for doing this and condemn Trump for doing this, I think as a resistance...
The entire world, it's so interesting as a political discussion because the entire world has condemned this in a way that's plain and uniform, in a way that almost narrows the ability to agitate around it. MSNBC is saying things that are just as radical as what you'd hear. I wouldn't even call it radical. To denounce this is just a statement of understanding what's plainly in front of you.
I think from a point of like resisting imperialism, we should look at this situation and think, dang, you know, having Maduro as this one important president, it's like that's a guy who they can come in and kidnap.
Yeah.
And then having a vice president after him who Trump can try to woo and play diplomat with, it's almost like it would be stronger to not be putting people in those positions where there's a head to be cut off the snake. You know what I mean?
I don't know. I understand what you're saying. I don't know if they'd be better off as an autonomous network.
That's sort of like the decentralist point people would make is like, there's an example of sort of a state structure that's supposed to help resist imperialism. Maybe not, you know, is that what it's doing most effectively than other structures? I mean, certainly the Venezuelan government is putting a lot of effort into like arming militias and like getting people ready, you know, to fight aside from just their military.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's unavoidable, like, you know, you inevitably have, you know, someone be considered a spokesperson, but like, you know, certainly with the Venezuelan system, it's like, it came from a presidential system that existed before socialist rule.
And you've also got to remember that Venezuela is a large country.
Yeah.
Some nature of centralization will just simply exist when we're discussing an implementation of a certain amount of people. How will they organize themselves?
Right.
Just looking at a map, the nation does tend to form.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The nation does tend to form.
The nation forms especially in circumstances where an invader has to be repelled. Yeah. You know, I feel like that is when you see nationalism become most vibrant in a country and also at least have the most potential to become revolutionary. Russia,
China, and France have denounced this. What strange bedfellows. Mm-hmm. Many countries around the world have. This is plain enough that it almost defies political education.
Yeah. So we have to move to a framework where beyond denouncing things and beyond hoping for the UN to do anything,
fat chance,
we need to be thinking about creating these sort of international structures that could supersede the UN. As like, you know, before the UN we had the International was being built, you know, across the working classes of all countries to try and create a new system that would end the wars that are constantly being started by imperialism. You know, maybe now is that chance for a new international organization to emerge. But it would have to be something that you know, is an arena for such very different groups and countries to find compromise and find deals. You know, that's kind of the point.
Yeah. Nothing to add there.
Either way, there's a ton of things that people can be doing to try and push back against this. You know, in the coming weeks, we're gonna make known some specific things that you can do. Some companies that are complicit in the Atlanta area and beyond, but you know, whether it's companies that participate in the defense industry, politicians that have some kind of sway in the diplomacy, you know, whatever you can do, reaching out to the press.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, this is an extension of the stuff that we've been doing the last month. It's great to know that, you know, there's a little bit infrastructure to hit the ground running. When we talked about going to protests and actions, we got the signs. We just have a lot of the infrastructure for that because, as it's been happening on the news, so many people have expressed their concerns and really put themselves on the line with their time, which has been just great. And it's been great to meet those people and work with them across the city. So, listen, we've covered a lot here today, and it's been a pretty fun ride.
Yeah.
We're not on television, so we don't have to, even Netflix stops the episode a few minutes early. They don't have to hit 1 hour each time.
No, it's up to us. I will say, you know, people can check out there's a link tree that we posted on our Instagram before. You can check out workersinpalestine.org and find out information about places that are creating stuff that you can resist in the U.S. and shout out to the groups that have been organizing stuff this weekend against the war. I think Indivisible, PSL, and various other, you know, I hate to...
It's only been a day. We had a general meeting today.
Yep.
Yeah, it's
it went
been
well
on our schedule. What you guys want? News is moving fast, and we're talking to you on YouTube in the afternoon. And so hopefully you're at your house doing something. This media coverage that you can talk to your friends and neighborhoods about has just a little bit of value as well.
Yeah.
So
take it as some fun, chill entertainment, and also take it as a wake-up call that, hey, these guys are out there plotting every day how they're going to conquer every piece of the earth. As people, you know, anti-militarists, anti-imperialists, we need to be on it. We need to be, you know, thinking on that level of every day we are working towards a concerted effort.
All right, listen. It is a Sunday. Thanks for tuning in.
For sure.
Enjoy the rest of your day, and the week will bring its own challenges, and we hope to support you through that entire week. There's a whole raft of activities at the Mosaic Atlanta website and the Mosaic Atlanta community. So, you know, give yourself an extra 15 minutes and plug in, and you'll find just a lot to plug into.
Yep, mosaicatlanta.org. Okay. We'll see you guys next time. Thanks for tuning in. Solid